I am back with everyone's favorite champion of justice. Well, perhaps not everyone, but anybody that I like, you're their favorite champion of justice. How are you, Larry?
Thank you, Jason. Mutually.
It's good
We're
to
truth
have you
tellers.
back on the
That doesn't
show.
go down well.
Say again?
We're truth tellers. With some people, that doesn't go down well. They want to understand and believe the Kool-Aid.
That's right. That's right. You and I are both fairly polarizing characters. I think most people either really, really like us or really, really hate us. And there's two people we're going to talk about tonight. Well, two entities. The People's Republic of China, or CCP, Chinese Communist Party, and Roger Stone. Not related, but two things that are on people's minds lately. A lot of people are wondering if President Donald Trump is going to pardon Roger Stone. He's just appeared on Sean Hannity. What's the latest information on this, Larry?
The latest information is that Roger Stone, Roger as we'll call him, I've known him a long time. I know him better than almost anybody else. Just give you a quick background, Jason. I represented him when he was caught on video at a toga party, a swingers party, during the convention in San Diego in 1996. I got the media off his back, so to speak. They were camped outside his house. Previously, I got to know Roger Stone when we were in our early 30s. He was a consultant with Paul Manafort and others, and was promoting Jack Kemp as president. I really loved Jack Kemp. And I asked Roger at the time to put me on the Executive Finance Committee, which I was, ironically, with President Trump when he was a businessman. I then used him for a couple of weeks during my Senate campaign. He was supposed to be exclusive to me. This is when I ran in 2003, 2004 in Miami and in Florida. He brought in his cronies, people like Michael Caputo, we can talk about that later, who's now, believe it or not, the spokesman for the Department of Health and Human Services during the coronavirus pandemic, of all people. And
wow.
They left with all my equipment, which I paid for personally when I had to let them go. We went our own way. I'd learned that Roger was actually representing Al Sharpton in a political campaign at the same time he was supposed to be exclusive to me. Now, ask yourself the question, is Roger Stone a conservative? Does he think that representing Al Sharpton is something that is ideologically consistent with what he claims to believe? But I'm just giving you that background because what really occurred, that straw that broke the camel's back, because I was willing to let Roger go his own way, I wanted to have nothing further to do with him, was the fact that he defamed Jerry Corsi, Dr. Corsi, and me during the Russian collusion witch hunt of Special Counsel Robert Mueller, because he feared, obviously, that Corsi was going to wind up testifying against him. In fact, Corsi never wished Roger any harm, never said anything negative about him. But Roger went out and viciously defamed Dr. Corsi and me on InfoWars and in other media. And we had to bring defamation lawsuits against Roger Stone for that, just to protect our own reputation and the damage that was done, and particularly for Dr. Corsi, who was destroyed financially through this entire ordeal. Now, fast forward, I attended Roger Stone's criminal prosecution on behalf of Dr. Corsi because Dr. Corsi had been subpoenaed by both Robert Mueller's people and by Stone's lawyers. And during that trial, it lasted 2 weeks. Roger Stone did not present one witness, did not present one unique piece of evidentiary documentary exhibit, and failed to take the stand himself. And Roger is not short on words, and of course he is a blowhard among many other things, but I suspect that his lawyers feared that he would wind up perjuring himself again. He had been indicted by Mueller on 5 counts of perjury, 1 count of obstruction of justice, and 1 count of witness tampering. With regard to the witness tampering, he threatened a material witness, person number 2. Corsi was person number 1 in the indictment, threatened his dog, and threatened to file bar complaints against his best friend, Margaret Kunstler, the wife of deceased liberal activist William Kunstler, a lawyer. And this is something Roger does. In fact, he's done this with me. He's puts people up to do it in retaliation or are bringing lawsuits against him, and also to try to scare Corsi and I from testifying against him. So this is who Roger Stone is, and anybody who sat through that trial, wouldn't matter what jury was on that in the jury box. And of course, in Washington D.C., you're going to get a liberal jury. 95% or more voted for Clinton and Obama of the citizens of that place. It's very liberal, but his lawyers never moved for a change of venue. Never did it. Now Roger is, someone who likes to take control. Why didn't Stone ask them to move the case, file a motion to move it to another venue if he felt that it was so prejudicial there, as he just said on Hannity?
Why? But why, Larry?
Ago.
What would be the reason for not doing that?
It's really hard to say. I think, here's my theory. I think he wanted to make himself the victim. I watched his demeanor during that trial, and it vacillated between looking concerned and elated. I mean, he likes to think of himself as a victim, and it's very good for fundraising to be the victim. Now, you got to ask yourself the question. He obviously raised a lot of money. As reported, he raised several $1 million for his defense. What did he use the money for? Now, one other fact is that when Judge Amy Berman Jackson, just a few days ago, and I don't like Amy Berman Jackson, I've had her on cases myself. She is very leftist, but she bent over backwards at that trial to at least appear fair to Stone. She pointed out in the order where she denied him a new trial, why didn't his lawyers, who had 2 jury consultants, even do a Google search to find out about this foreman who they claim is prejudiced against President Trump and Stone? Why didn't they do that? So where did all this money go if they didn't actually have jury consultants that would do their job? So there absolutely is zero chance that Roger Stone's conviction in rapid fire, in rapid time, it only took about a day to convict him on all those 7 counts. Not even that, really. There's no chance that that gets reversed on appeal. And if he gets a new trial, and that's extremely remote, almost impossible at this point, Amy Berman Jackson wrote an 80-page order and nailed him to the proverbial cross. And no disrespect to our Savior, Jesus Christ, or Moses, or King David, or anybody that's righteous, is that there's no way he gets a new trial. So right now, he's facing prison time. And Amy Berman Jackson ordered him, this is the judge, to report in 2 weeks. I'm sure his lawyers will file a motion to have him serve his time at home during the coronavirus.
Yeah.
But his claim that it's a death sentence is about as credible as his claim during the time that he was trying to raise money from evangelicals and Christians and other people of faith that he had found God. No sooner than 24 hours later, he was frequenting a strip club. Now, I don't think God frequents strip clubs. In all seriousness. And that's where exactly I served him, because he was evading service of process on the complaints that Dr. Corsi and I brought at that strip club, among other places, when he was running.
You're amazing, Larry.
Process
and it's
service.
Amazing that you tracked him down there. Let me ask you this, though, because what you're laying out is a very compelling case. And I'm telling you, for people who haven't seen you operate in a courtroom, when I've observed you, it's like watching Michael Jordan on a basketball court. Whatever people think about your politics, whatever people think about you personally, your knowledge, your experience, your skill is really something to behold in the courtroom. Why is it that people like Michael Avenatti are being let out of jail, and then how can they justify, we've heard they let murderers out, all kinds of people out over coronavirus. How can they put a nonviolent offender in?
Well, I think he probably will be let out. I think Amy Berman Jackson will do that for at least a couple months. But you can bet that the Bureau of Prisons has sanitized those prisons, has tested and removed any prison guards or prisoners that have the coronavirus. So he's not facing a death sentence. Like I said, that's about as credible as finding God in a strip club. So this is Roger Stone, okay? And this is why people who don't pay attention think that somehow he's wrong. Now, Jason, ask yourself this question. If you want to hold James Comey, Andrew McCabe, James Clapper, former director of national intelligence, John Brennan accountable for lying under oath, and conservatives do, rabidly we do. And I have indicted Mueller. I'm going to try him once this coronavirus is over. You were there. You actually covered it with your video, your fine technical capabilities. You can find it at freedomwatchusa.org and also at Crowdsource the Truth if you want to watch the grand jury proceeding where Mueller was indicted. But if these people should be held accountable for lying under oath, then shouldn't conservatives also want Stone held accountable for lying under oath? There was absolutely no doubt that he committed the acts which he was alleged to have committed in the indictment. And in fact, if he felt he was innocent, why didn't he take the witness stand? Or why didn't they present one witness at trial? None, zero, nada.
Let's unravel that for a second, Larry, because there's comments coming in. First of all, the boy 26, who's an avid Crowdsource the Truth follower and a fellow Philadelphian, he tells us that he met Roger Stone at that strip club, so that's interesting. There's a lot of people here who support Roger Stone in the comments who aren't liking what you're saying, but let's just be clear. It was a problem the way the FBI busted in the door and got him pulled out of there and everything. What you're talking about are the things that Roger Stone did after he was questioned.
Well, let me back up to that. And I'm telling the truth. People don't want to hear it, and that's too bad. But they have to face it, because if you're going to keep the house of the left in order, if you're going to hold them accountable, then you have to keep your own house in order. And if the legal system is going to function, you can't have people coming in front of Congress or any place else, lying under oath, threatening witnesses, and obstructing justice. So I suggest that these people that don't like what I'm saying just simply back off and say, okay, Comey, McCabe, the rest, go scot-free. No problem. At the end of Hannity's show tonight, he said, what happened to you, Roger Stone, should never happen to any American. Well, I guess Hannity, too, finds lying okay. And in fact, he lies every night because he promises the American people there's going to be justice right around the corner. He knows that Comey and McCabe and Clintons and the Obamas will never be indicted. He knows that the Attorney General, Bill Barr, is just simply occupying space under his desk with a mask now that there's the coronavirus scandal at the Justice Department. He knows that. So Hannity finds nothing wrong with lying under oath. And see, this is the problem, is that how can you hold yourself out as holier than thou, or wanting just simply to enforce the rule of law, when you say, if that person appears to be on my side, let's let him go scot-free. So that's not right. But let's also back up, Jason, to the raid. Roger Stone, when he was running my campaign for that few weeks, I remember sitting out at his house on Biscayne Bay. Had a big house, was quite well off, made a lot of money lobbying for Donald Trump and others. And he's smoking a cigar and he says, isn't this great? I feel like Hyman Roth in The Godfather. Who was Hyman Roth? That was Meyer Lansky. Roger Stone's an admirer of the mafia. In fact, that's one of the things that got him convicted, because he threatened Credico that if he wouldn't lie, like Frank Pantangeli in The Godfather, that he would harm his dog, and was suggesting that he should simply take the fifth rather than tell the truth. Credico had been called before the Mueller grand jury. So I believe that the FBI, I'm not justifying it, but I'm saying that somebody who makes a point of fantasizing and romanticizing the mafia is that the FBI probably felt that there was risk in going into his house without sufficient protection, whether it was being armed or otherwise. And I believe that Roger Stone, to a large extent, brought that upon himself with the fact that he is an admirer of the mafia and has made that very well known over the years. So, and the mafia is not exactly a bunch of Girl Scouts or Boy Scouts. So I think that helps explain what went on. But it's a little bit like Eva Peron, you know, the movie and the play. Don't Cry for Me, Argentina. Is that don't cry for Roger Stone. Roger Stone's getting what he deserves, and the president's making a big mistake if he pardons him, because he's going to need some independent votes in the upcoming election. And Roger Stone, for good reason, in this particular instance, is not liked by independents. People don't want that kind of person in and around the president. And I've always said to the president, I love you, President Trump. I think you're doing a great job. But your one weakness, your major weakness, is the people you hang around, the sleazy people you hang around, whether it's Roger Stone, Paul Manafort, Rick Gates, Michael Cohen, or the rest. You are who you associate with. Now you're the president of the United States. You have to rise above that. And if Trump goes off and pardons Stone, it's not going to be like pardoning my client, Sheriff Joe Arpaio, who deserved it, who was just simply trying to obey and enforce the law. Roger Stone was intentionally disobeying the law and lying under oath. And if he sanctions that, he will probably pay a huge political price.
Well, I mean, I hear what you're saying, but the question now becomes, do you think Donald Trump will pardon Roger Stone? Because
I
he's
think
done
he
some
will.
things that I don't think are too strategic.
Well, I think he will. I think, first of all, uh, uh, President Trump is not known as someone who's terribly loyal. Okay, that's just a fact, and everybody knows that. But more importantly, Stone knows a lot about Donald Trump. He was Stone's lobbyist for the gambling industry for many, many years. Now, I'm not accusing the president of anything, but that industry is what it is. We know what it is. We know who has infiltrated it. And Roger Stone knows a lot about the president, just like Michael Cohen knew a lot about the president, who tried to harm him when the president did not come to his aid. So if the president does not come to Stone's aid, I think the thinking of the president may be that he may go after me ultimately. You know, drowning men will do drastic things. And the bottom line is this, too. Stone was sentenced to 40 months in prison. He won't do 40 months. Maybe he does a year. Maybe he does 18 months. He's not going to die in prison. But it's a lesson to everybody in our court system and in our justice system. And I'm writing a book now. Our justice system's broken. It's destroyed enough. We have politicized and corrupt federal judges in particular that make decisions on the basis of politics and their own bias and prejudice rather than the law. How are you helping cleaning up that justice system if you're the president by letting someone off the hook who tried to subvert that justice system by lying under oath, being convicted on 5 counts of perjury, who didn't present one witness in his defense and little to no documentation in his defense, didn't move for a change of venue, didn't do a proper voir dire of the jury, and just let him go scot-free and say, okay, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that he lied under oath. You know, the justice system's not all that important. When you yourself, Mr. President, have been screaming correctly about what a corrupt justice system tried to do to you with the Russian and Ukrainian witch hunts and the ensuing impeachment proceedings. So I can't see how, if the president's representing the American people and trying to restore our justice system, he can pardon Donald Trump. Pardon, excuse me, Roger Stone. But right. I don't think even Amy Berman Jackson is going to send him to prison. I think she'll let him out on his own recognizance, at least while the coronavirus is still contagious during the early months. And you know, whether or not Stone gets a pardon, that's up to the president, but he will not get a reversal of his conviction on appeal. Zero chance.
Yeah. And I can tell that a lot of people are really not following what you're trying to explain, Larry, because they're saying things like the FBI framed him. That is correct. I think the FBI was really not justified in busting into his house like that. But what you're talking about are the things that happened after that, because essentially the FBI did the same thing to Jerome Corsi, but Jerome Corsi did not call up people who he suspected to be witnesses and tell them what to say and speak to them in the way that Roger Stone spoke to Randy Credico. Isn't that right?
First of all, the FBI did not frame him. I'm not a fan of the FBI myself, believe me. I mean, they engaged in mass surveillance against the American people. I've sued them a number of times. I've sued Comey, I've sued Mueller, I've sued, you know, the whole lot of them. But Roger Stone was convicted on his own words, and that's why people need to go back and take a look at that trial. I have the transcript. I'll put it up on our website. His own words, his own emails, his own text messages is what hung him. And that's why he never took the stand, and that's why there were no witnesses, because he was dead to rights from day one in his own words.
Yeah, and people are saying that he was set up, which that's not what we're discussing, because let's say you get set up and you find yourself in court and then you start, you know, posting Instagram threats to the judge and stuff like that. It's a pretty surefire way to get yourself jammed up, and it's not that smart.
Well, it was Senator Kennedy, not John Kennedy, the president, but this Kennedy from Louisiana, who said that Roger Stone should win the Beavis and Butthead Award. He never saw anybody talk himself into an indictment before, is that his extremely provocative attacks on Mueller and the rest were unhinged, and he set himself up for the fall. But I ask people, okay, because, you know, your supporters are my supporters, but they've been deluded. And this is the disservice that is done by people like Sean Hannity. Sean Hannity, I was just looking at his Wikipedia page, lists 4 universities that he went to, but he didn't get a degree from any of them, okay? He barely finished high school. And he's not the sharpest knife in the drawer, and he exploits people. He exploits his audience. He's got up to now 4 million viewers a night by promising them justice when no justice happens. He disses people that actually take a strong stand, like Sheriff Arpaio or the Bundys or Laura Loomer or others of my clients. And he jingles the change by going with the flow. And the flow right now is the misinformation that's out there is that Roger Stone should somehow get off scot-free. Now, that's a mistake. And I just say it one more time and we can move on to China.
Yeah.
But if we conservatives are to hold the other side accountable, we have to keep our own house in order. And we cannot have a double standard. And that does not mean that you don't prosecute Comey and McCabe and Mueller, the Clintons, the Obamas, the Brennans, the Clappers. Yes, they should be prosecuted too, but that does not excuse someone who lies under oath, threatens witnesses, and obstructs justice. And Roger Stone can spin it all he wants, but that's what he did, and that's what he was convicted for, not having presented one witness, nor much of any documentation in his defense, and not having moved for a change of venue if he felt the District of Columbia was too liberal, nor doing a proper jury search of their backgrounds and their predilections. So, don't cry for me, Argentina, if you're Roger Stone. This is, in my opinion, something that he's doing to raise money. He'll come out of prison, probably fairly wealthy. He's not going to die in prison. And, maybe finally he'll find God in prison, because he certainly didn't find God in a strip club.
He found the boy 26. Now, Larry,
he may have found some other things in a strip club, but it wasn't God.
You recently actually deposed Roger Stone. Do we want to look at any of that?
Yeah, go ahead, show it, because what happened, you saw the real Roger Stone, and I put that up because I mitigated the damage that he did to me with all of his lies, and also with Corsi. I wanted people to see depositions are public proceedings, the real Roger Stone. And he cursed at me, used the F word a lot, threatened me, all kinds of things. And this is Roger Stone. It's not what you see on Hannity. This is the real deal here.
Yeah. So let's take a look at this.
If you want to keep insulting me, this will be over. You can run back
I'm
to the
not
judge like a
insulting
little.
Better do it quick.
Before you're disbarred.
Stop. Mr. Klayman.
No further questions. This deposition is concluded for now, subject to my going back and moving the court to produce all the documents that we requested.
Subject to your still being admitted to the bar. Please note that for the record.
It's actually a pretty tame edit. There's a lot of foul language that he uses, and he directly, personally insults you. He calls you all kinds of things.
Calls me a bitch, all kinds of the F word several times,
Yeah,
so.
Pretty unprofessional conduct for a deposition, but where can people see that on freedomwatchusa.org?
Go to LarryKlayman.com and you can see it there. And again, I put it up there because, he did harm my reputation and Dr. Corsi's, and I want them to see exactly who it was that was behind the defamation and the slander and libel. So it's
right
there.
There we go. Stone Cold Truth, I guess, is... People will find it there. So let's move on, Larry, because you've introduced a class action lawsuit against the Chinese Communist Party. We spoke about that in your last appearance on the show. It's interesting because you and I were on the phone this morning. I saw a 60 Minutes Australia piece where there's actually another law firm bringing a class action suit against China. Where do we want to begin with this?
Well, that was, in my opinion, a ruse. They don't have a theory to sue China at this time, but reportedly, that was a relative of Joe Biden who did that down in Miami.
Who brought the suit?
Berman law firm. Yeah. Now, where our suit is different, and it's been filed as well in Jerusalem, Israel. I have really fine Israeli legal colleagues over there, and I'm getting contacted from all over the world. So similar cases will be filed around the world, is that what I alleged is proving to now be true. First, dissed by the leftist and Fox News cable news networks, but we now know that the virus emanated from a laboratory in Wuhan, China. Just so happens the only bioweapons laboratory in China. Does 2 and 2 equal 4? Do bears live in the woods? Do fat dogs sometimes let off gas? One might say. Well, you know what? The Chinese created a bioweapon, and we have actually experts, whistleblowers, and there are very renowned doctors at the Pasteur Institute in Paris, France, that say they also laced that with HIV to enhance its ability to kill. And so therefore, what we alleged was that China loses its immunity because it violated international conventions and treaties which outlaw bioweapons, of which they are signatory. And we also allege that by violating World Health Organization regulations, which they also signed on to, they lost their immunity. So we were 10 steps ahead of Senator Tom Cotton, who puts on a good show on Hannity, did it just a few minutes ago, saying, oh, we're going to have Congress remove immunity. Well, we don't need to remove it. When you violate international treaties and create what is in effect a terrorist weapon, and you can read our complaint at freedomwatchusa.org, we already have about 2,000 putative plaintiffs that signed up. It's very expensive, so I'm having to recruit lawyers in the United States and overseas, and we could use the tax-deductible contributions. Go to freedomwatchusa.org and contribute, and also sign up for the class action as a possible plaintiff, and we'll tell you if you qualify, and you probably do. Everybody's been harmed at this point. Is that this was a legitimate and is a legitimate lawsuit. We don't need congressmen grandstanding on Hannity and trying to raise dollars as they hide in their basements at home and don't do their work in Washington to tell us otherwise. And then on top of it, we filed a criminal complaint at the International Criminal Court in The Hague, Holland, for crimes against humanity. Within 48 hours, Jason, I got an acknowledgement from the court that they are opening that case to process it to see if they'll begin an investigation. I'm confident that they will. And people like so-called Judge Andrew Napolitano, who's become a virulent anti-Trump hater, and I've been very critical of him, says, oh no, we're not a member of the criminal court, so they won't investigate. Well, that's not true. They have worldwide jurisdiction. It doesn't matter whether the United States is a member of that court or China is a member of that court. They have the power to do it, and I believe they will do it. Just years ago, many years ago, they indicted, tried, and convicted General Pinochet, the president of Chile, for crimes against humanity, and he had the good fortune of dying before he went to jail. So, these are legitimate cases. We also have a Freedom of Information Act case. See, we do that too, but we just don't get documents like Judicial Watch does. We use them, and we're seeking to show that the intelligence agencies in this country knew or should have known that the leak from this laboratory was a bioweapon and should have known about it much sooner and alerted the president. Now, I believe that the deep state held this information back from President Trump. Already, they tried to remove him on several occasions with phony wiretaps and warrants in the Russian collusion investigation, fusion.
Oh, Larry, we just lost you there. You see, this is happening. I got to look into the cause of this. You could probably still hear me, Larry. Hang on just one second. I'm going to recover this for you. Stand by just a second. Sorry, Larry. Hang on. Hey, Larry, there's a technical problem that just occurred. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I've just brought up a backup system so you can keep going while I restore this. Carry on, please.
Anyway, shouldn't the intelligence agencies have known, and we're seeking to get that information because they should be held accountable as well. So this is the kind of thing that is in a multi-front war to find out what went on and to bring the Chinese to justice. Why should Americans pay for this tremendous damage? Why should other countries in the world pay for this tremendous damage with tax dollars when it's the Chinese who are responsible for this severe harm to us and to others?
Yeah. So, Larry, you're talking just a moment ago that people can go on to freedomwatchusa.org and potentially qualify to be class action plaintiffs. What would be the requirement for somebody to qualify? If somebody's lost their job, is that sufficient damages to sue China?
Well, we've all been exposed to it, so we've been harmed in that way. We've been emotionally scarred by it. We've lost time in our work. Some of us have lost our employment, have lost our businesses. The lead plaintiff in Dallas is a company called Buzz Photos that went bankrupt, a photo shop. So yes, we've all been damaged, and I believe that once the time is right to add these putative plaintiffs to the case, the court will certify a class at some point. They will all come in. So in the meantime, I need to get a team of lawyers up, because one person can't represent tens of thousands, of maybe hundreds of thousands or millions of people. And that's expensive. So I hope that people will go and sign up to be a plaintiff at the appropriate time and place, and also contribute with tax-deductible contributions, because this is extremely expensive. Forget, for the time being, forget about Hillary Clinton, forget about Fusion GPS, forget about Comey. Right now, it's life or death. Right now, it's us with regard to the communist Chinese. And I want to add, do not blame Chinese Americans or Asian Americans for this. Do not whip up racist backlash, because it just so happens that over 30% of the people who signed up as plaintiffs in our lawsuit are Chinese Americans and Asian Americans, and they're very patriotic people. It's the communist leadership in Beijing that should be thrown in prison with the key thrown away. These are evil, evil, evil people.
Oops, sorry, Larry. Hang on one second. I'm going to add this back here. Okay. So got a little crazy deal going on here with that crash, but we've got you back.
Okay. Well, maybe somebody did it on purpose. Who knows?
I think it might be. I've got to check out the temperature of that other computer. Sorry, stay with me just a second. I'm trying to build a system that's resistant to these sometimes frequent, sometimes infrequent crashes, and we're almost there. So we've got you back. We're coming back in just right now.
Well, the other thing is that during this coronavirus crisis, people are on the internet much more, and it creates a lot of traffic, which I'm sure affects transmission. But I'm not the expert, Jason. You are.
Well, it's throwing all kinds of things off, and I'm just doing my best to keep up. So here we go. We've got you back now, Larry. Everything's back to normal. So, okay, we've got the class action suit against China. Tell us some more about this other law firm that's related to Joe Biden. What would be their motivation for bringing a class action suit against China?
Well, to get publicity. They're a personal injury law firm, so it'll probably bring in work. But they never alleged a basis upon which the Chinese government could not claim immunity. So in the face of the lawsuit is going nowhere. It was a public relations stunt, and it was reportedly a relative of Biden who's in that firm who brought the suit. So they're trying to run interference for Biden.
What's the law firm that's bringing the suit, or should we not discuss?
Called the Berman Law Firm.
No relation to Amy Berman Jackson, is it?
Who knows? Anything's possible in today's world.
Wow. And so what's happening with all the other cases that you're involved in? You've got this ongoing thing with the Bundys, and we were really disappointed that William Barr has been not doing anything that we would expect a Trump appointee to do.
Worse than not doing anything. His Justice Department filed the appeal. Of course, it was before he became Attorney General, but I asked him in correspondence to withdraw that appeal. I never had the courtesy of even getting a response. I mean, God knows what the guy's doing over there, because he hasn't done anything. And this goes back to what I was saying about Stone. Yes, Comey should be prosecuted. McCabe should be prosecuted. The Lovebirds should be prosecuted. Hillary should be prosecuted. Bill should be prosecuted. Obama and his people should be prosecuted. This guy does nothing. Instead, they file an appeal to have Bundy's dismissal of his indictment reversed and him retried. So that's where we are with this. Now, the court has reset the oral argument on that appeal to May 29th. It's going to be done by teleconference, not in person, because of the pandemic. But, and I'm confident ultimately of success, even with the Ninth Circuit. But, this is an outrage, and it tells you that we have no Justice Department. And, Mr. President, rather than considering pardons for Roger Stone, have your Attorney General actually do something. I mean, the guy is just a overstuffed blowhard that's occupying space.
There was something on Fox News maybe last week or 2 weeks ago where I think John Solomon was saying that there were indictments coming down. How is anybody getting indicted during this pandemic? It seems like nothing's happening.
Nobody's getting indicted either during the pandemic or afterwards. I can assure you of that. Washington, D.C., it's mutual assured destruction. You push hard on the opposing party, they'll push hard on you. Everybody has dirt on everybody else. Nobody wants to stick their neck out. They're in it for themselves. They're not in it for the American people. But I like John Solomon. He's a nice person, but he's never quite understood what goes on in Washington, D.C. And Hannity uses it. He has Solomon on along with Sarah Carter with that, strange sick smile of hers every time she comes on, promising things that are never going to happen to get themselves on TV and to boost ratings. And it's just not fair and it's not right to lead the American people down the primrose path, particularly conservatives, having them believe that something's going to happen to boost your ratings, to boost advertising dollars for Fox, and to jingle the change. And, this is another thing about Fox that really gets under my skin, because they're no better than CNN or MSNBC, even if they're ideologically closer to we conservatives. And of course, we know they're moving left. Even the president's been criticizing them deeply lately. Just a few days ago, Chris Wallace, an ultra-leftist, interviewed Nancy Pelosi and basically bowed down to her and kissed her derriere for all to see. But they've been exploiting this coronavirus. And Fox was the first to have these death charts that would go on the right-hand side of the television screen with minute-by-minute, real-time statistics of people dying. It's like what you see on highways with the national debt, increasing, as you drive by.
Well, it's right over here on 38th Street. They have that sign.
Yeah. Now, why does Fox do that? Why did the other networks file suit? Because that boosts ratings. If you scare the hell out of people, if you create panic, they're going to watch because they think the world's ending. And it was reported just last week that all these networks are making money like they've never made before. And that's why the hosts are smiling. They're happier than punch. They're going to get raises next year. As everybody else crashes and burns, the cable networks are doing better than ever because they create fear and panic, causes people to get glued to their screen. Family members are going into a catatonic state, fighting with each other, won't associate with each other for fear that their brothers and sisters, so to speak, are going to give them coronavirus, and the country's coming unglued. So, this is the whoredom of Fox News and the rest of the cable networks, regardless of their political ideology. They are an anathema to this country. And I've said on my radio show and my daily podcast, I do a daily podcast now. You can find it at freedomwatchusa.org, on Spotify, on iTunes, on Patreon, on Roku, tap through it in Roku, Facebook, Twitter. I've been saying, get up off the couch, turn Fox News off, roll up your sleeves, put the beer down and potato chips down, and get to work and join our class action, do something positive, and contribute to our cause at freedomwatchusa.org, or do some other thing that furthers the interests of this country. Just don't be a couch potato and be entertained by these cable news networks and get yourself into a catatonic state where you can't even function.
Yeah. The thing I wanted to say, Larry, is that I think there's another reason why Fox News does the things that it does beyond just wanting to get ratings. I'm fully convinced that Fox News and every corporate news outlet is a social engineering operation that works for billionaires and elites to do their bidding. A lot of people seem to forget that Fox News is owned by Rupert Murdoch's News Corp, which also owns the Wall Street Journal, also owns the New York Post. He's pictured here in a photograph with Robert Maxwell, the father of Ghislaine Maxwell, famous accomplice of Jeffrey Epstein. Robert Maxwell, many people believe, was a Mossad agent, not just a newspaper mogul. And irrespective of anyone's opinion of Israel, Robert Maxwell was involved in a lot of very bad stuff. And I personally don't trust him, and I have seen numerous occasions where Rupert Murdoch's New York Post and even Fox have put out stories that I think are helpful to Jeffrey Epstein, have put out false stories about Jeffrey Epstein, and they've recently put out a story alleging that someone was going to bomb the statue of Alice in Wonderland in Central Park. And it's strange, Larry, because I've been in touch with the Manhattan District Attorney. I've been in touch with the New York Post journalist, one of them, who contributed to this article. And there are quotes from the suspect's text messages and social media posts that are quoted in the complaint. They're quoted in the article, but nothing about the statue of Alice in Wonderland. And there's some very strange language in the complaint that was submitted to the district attorney that causes me to believe that might not exactly be what was said by the suspect. Seems more like something that was added in there, and it's using some very lawyerly language to potentially eliminate it from the complaint if it comes under scrutiny. In your experience, Larry, are there ever lawyers who phrase things grammatically or put them in a certain vague sense where it can kind of go this way or that if it needs to?
Yeah, I mean, that's what lawyers do. Yeah.
Right.
The old expression is, a lawyer lying, is he moving his mouth? You know, that's that's the old adage. You know, why do sharks not attack lawyers? Professional courtesy. You know, so
Right.
this is what we're at. I become the anti-lawyer over time. I don't care for most lawyers, but Fox is not just that. Now, when the issue of our lawsuit, by the way, Fox won't report anything I do because I've had issues with Fox over the years. They won't put our clients on when they take strong stands. But they were very quick to say, when they finally had to admit that the virus likely leaked from the Wuhan laboratory, the virology lab, they were quick to say, of course, there's no evidence that it was a bioweapon. How can they say that? They don't know one way or the other.
Right.
Now, it just so happens that Rupert Murdoch was married to somebody who was very close to the Chinese Politburo. Just so happens that Rupert Murdoch has holdings in Asia, Sky News, which depend on the Chinese to be able to continue to broadcast. And look at Bloomberg, same thing. You know, Bloomberg's very, very pro-Palestinian in many ways. Why is that? Because he has a lot of holdings in the Middle East, that are broadcast into Arab countries. There are these conflicts of interest, and that's something which viewers should understand when they drink the Kool-Aid, watching what's spewed forth, particularly on these cable news networks.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm with you on what you're saying here. We've got Rupert Murdoch pictured with his wife, who some people believe
Then wife, not married to her anymore.
May have been a Chinese spy. She was involved with Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner. And I mean, again, I'm just saying, I think that these are intelligence, they're arms, they're fingers on the hands of the intelligence services. I was previously showing a picture of Rupert Murdoch hanging out with Ghislaine Maxwell, and they're smiling. So, I mean, that seems strange to me when she is pictured in Rupert Murdoch's New York Post eating a hamburger at In-N-Out Burger, and there's a ton of Photoshop going on in the image. I confronted journalists at the New York Post and asked them, how could they run this story? I mean, Ghislaine Maxwell was about 57 when this ran in the story. This photo looks like a woman who's maybe 30. It's been heavily photo retouched. The story was completely inaccurate with regard to what actually happened there. The New York Post did not do a follow-up, did not explain how this false story got in there. I'm 100% convinced,
who owns
Larry.
the New York Post, Jason? Who owns
Murdoch.
the New York Post? Murdoch, yeah. So here's another thing. Lachlan Murdoch, who now is the CEO, chairman of Fox Corporation, which runs Fox News and Fox Business,
News Corp,
is a leftist. That explains the leftist push of Fox News, little by little. They leave Hannity and Laura Ingraham and Tucker Carlson in place. Carlson's not even a conservative. He plays both sides. But they leave it in place because that's making money. But if you look at the news division, it's moving further and further and further left, whether it's Chris Wallace, whether it's Juan Williams, whether it's Arthel Neville, whether it's Brett Baer, and others. And the president's been critical of them. Lachlan Murdoch and his brother James got themselves into a lot of trouble, to put it really nicely, in Great Britain a number of years ago, particularly James, because their newspapers there were literally breaking into the cell phones of the royal family for gossip, for their gossip.
How is that not espionage?
Well, they were brought up in front of Parliament, but you have to assume that Murdoch, with this tremendous wealth, just bought everybody off, and they walked off scot-free. And that
I
helps
don't assume
explain
that.
why.
I
Helps
think they're
explain why,
intelligence operatives.
well, it also helps explain why, except for a few pundits who are no longer on Fox News, like Eric Bolling, who's now with Sinclair. Okay, no one really cared much or would talk much about the NSA massive spying and our lawsuits to enjoin them, because you know what? The Murdochs were doing the same thing in Great Britain, and they could have gone to prison for that. So you see,
How did they avoid that?
Time. Excuse me?
How did they avoid going to prison for hacking all those phones in the
Probably
United
paid
Kingdom?
everybody off. I mean, that's the way it works. Look, the rich and the powerful don't go anywhere. They just get richer and richer and richer. And this is the populism side of Larry Klayman, okay, which is not altogether different from some elements of the left in terms of where I see things are going, because it is a fact that rich and powerful people in this country can buy themselves out of trouble, or if you're Hillary Clinton or Barack Obama with tremendous power and prestige, also walk off scot-free. So that's the fact of life, and it's why this country is headed into a revolution. Ultimately, I want to see peaceful and legal means to avoid that, but I do believe that's where we're headed, because the people are wising up. And when you get into a crisis like this coronavirus, people are going to be looking for scapegoats. Yeah. And they're going to be looking at these rich and powerful people who were running this country, who weren't prepared for the pandemics and for weapons of mass destruction. What have we been doing, Jason, since 9/11? We knew there was going to be a bioweapon attack. We haven't done shit, excuse the French. Whether it's a Republican or a Democrat president or administration, they haven't done shit, okay? And they need to be held accountable. To be honest, President Trump didn't do shit, but he has some excuse because he was wrapped up in these collusion investigations.
Right.
And, you know, it happened, right? And I don't blame the president, but he didn't do anything. And Bush and Cheney didn't do anything to prepare for 9/11 when it was on Bush's desk that something like that was going to happen. Our leaders have failed us. Now, I think the president's doing a good job trying to bail us out, but he bears some responsibility, and the Democrats bear a whole lot of responsibility for having got here in the first place.
Yeah. I think a lot of people are a little bit disappointed in some of the things that have been happening with regard to President Trump's handling of coronavirus. Interesting. Someone in the comments just said, what about Harvey Weinstein? Yeah, I mean, there you go. Rupert Murdoch is hanging out with all the biggest scumbags you can think of. So I don't know. I'm not sure that Fox News or the Wall Street Journal or the New York Post should be trusted. I'll remind our viewers that the Wall Street Journal... No, they shouldn't. The Wall Street Journal published a lot of false information about the death of Peter Smith, information that Peter Smith himself posthumously proved false by emails that he had sent to Charles Ortel, which the liar Shane Harris was not aware of, and when I confronted him about it, he hung up the phone. Let's switch gears in our last few minutes, Larry. A loyal viewer has just informed me that Laura Loomer was just featured on the local news in Florida, and she's raised more money than all of her opponents for the congressional run over there. Laura's represented by you in her case against Facebook. She's doing absolutely amazing work trying to win a seat in Congress there, and I think we need Laura in Congress. If anybody is in Florida's 21st district, make sure you're registered to vote, and vote for Laura Loomer for Congress. What's happening with the Facebook suit, Larry?
The Facebook suit is on appeal, and the D.C. Circuit, I'll be filing a pleading tomorrow, wants to decide it on the briefs because it doesn't want to meet during coronavirus. Now, Supreme Court is doing oral arguments by teleconference, and I think it's important for the judges to ask questions of us. And what we have going for us, this is a case for antitrust violations and for political discrimination, is that, believe it or not, the District of Columbia, the place that Roger Stone thinks is the worst place for conservatives, and it generally is actually on our side, because DC has a law that says that you can't discriminate politically in a public forum. So they've actually come in on our behalf. Laura is a plaintiff in that case. Freedom Watch is a plaintiff, and we have a very good chance of prevailing and making some law. I also have lawsuits in Florida against Facebook for defaming Laura Loomer as a dangerous person and a domestic terrorist. and those are moving forward in one manner, shape, or form, and another lawsuit in Palm Beach for other media operations that have tried to destroy her. And I think it's very important for Laura she's going to win this primary. She has no opposition. So she can basically save the money for the general race against the Democrats.
Can she use her own personal money if she wins the lawsuit to support her campaign? Is that allowed?
She can, although it's not likely to happen fast enough at this point. And I'm endorsing her in my personal capacity. I can't as head of a public interest group, and I represent her. But I think that she needs to focus on winning the general election right now, and she needs to move a little bit to the center in that regard and not endorse. I hope she does not endorse the pardon of Roger Stone. I think that'll cost her votes. And she needs to be herself and tell the truth, because she is one of the truly brave people out there. And you'll never see Laura Loomer on Fox News, banned as well from Fox News.
Wow.
Because they don't want people that actually, they don't want to, huh?
She used to be on there.
Yeah, well, they don't want anybody on there that takes a strong stand. They don't want anybody on there that says Rashida Tlaib and Ilham Omar are anti-Semites. They don't want anybody on there that says that Islam persecutes homosexuals and women. Can't say those things, even though there's no dispute that that's the case. And she's not a racist. She's not a domestic terrorist. She's not dangerous. She's a very fine woman. And I pray that she will win in Palm Beach, which is my native county as well. And I will vote for her.
Absolutely. And if people are in Florida's 21st district, they can vote for Laura as well. I mean, you know, if she's able to succeed in this Facebook case, perhaps she'll be the wealthiest congressperson to not ever steal money from the people of the United States. Larry, why do you suppose President Trump, when he was questioned about this insider trading that Dianne Feinstein was involved in after they had that hearing or that meeting where they told them that every retail store was going to be closed, and she invested, according to True Pundit, making over $5 million on Amazon.com stock? Why did President Trump come to her defense, saying she was a good person, a person of integrity? Why aren't they investigating these people?
I don't know. Ask yourself what Feinstein may have on the president in that regard. But it's not just Dianne Feinstein. It's Richard Burr, head of the Intelligence Committee, Senate Intelligence Committee, who dumped his stock days before it was known that this coronavirus was extremely dangerous. Now, this gets back to what I was saying earlier. The intelligence agencies had to have known about the leak of the virus from the laboratory in Wuhan, China. They probably got intelligence briefings on the Senate Intelligence Committee. Dianne Feinstein used to be the chairman, then she was the ranking member, but she's still on the committee. So they had inside information, which led them to dump their stock and make millions and millions of dollars. This is a crime. It's being investigated, but don't expect the government to do anything about it. If anything, there probably should be shareholder derivative lawsuits filed against both of them, you know, privately. But it's not going to happen from the government. You can bet that our do-nothing Attorney General is looking the other way.
Yeah, I'm really...
And why? And why, Jason? Because Burr and Feinstein have access to intelligence, have dirt on all of them. It's, again, mutual assured destruction.
That's the way
Including
the
Trump.
ball... That's the way the ball rolls in Washington, D.C., Larry. You've written a book about all of these whores and how you came to fight the establishment. People can still get that book on Amazon.com. They're also going to get the entire library of Larry Klayman books. What's the dollar amount that gets people the free books, Larry?
Well, I have a 4-volume work, which I'm republishing. It's probably about 6 now. It's columns I've ever written. If you follow them, you can see what happened throughout American history from around 1996 forward. You know, when really things started to heat up at Judicial Watch, later at Freedom Watch. And it's called Essays of a Mad Man. Not a madman, but a mad man. And I'm writing a new book, Jason, that'll be out this fall, right before the election. That's what I've been doing a lot during this coronavirus, being quarantined.
A good use of your time, Larry. And people can support what you're doing at freedomwatchusa.org. Go on there and donate any amount of your choice. There really is a sense that we've got no justice in this country. The Justice Department is certainly not too busy, so we need Larry and his associates at freedomwatchusa.org. I hope that viewers will go and visit the website, donate. You can check out all the cases, Larry's blogs, his radio show. It's always a pleasure having you on the show, Larry. Is there anything you'd like to discuss before we wrap it up tonight?
Well, my uncle Benny used to say, if I had no bad luck, I'd have no luck at all. And then he used to work in a meatpacking plant. Then he would go to the back room, take a shot of scotch, and come back. Right?
Yikes.
So I would say if we had no injustice at the Justice Department, we'd have no justice at all. And Freedom Watch is your Justice Department. So I hope that you support us and sign up for our class actions, because we, the people, need to rise up during this crisis. God helps those that help themselves. God's with us, by the way. I do believe he's sending a message to us to shape up or ship out, and we better shape up pretty soon or we won't be around. Many times, as chronicled in the Bible, he's cleaned house. We need to really get our act together and do things the right way going forward and reestablish the vision of our founding fathers and protect it from being destroyed.
Absolutely. And I know you're very busy, Larry, but on your next opportunity, I'd love to have you back on the show to talk about some of the legal aspects that we're going to be facing if Bill Gates, the government, private industry tries to compel people to have an RFID chip or some similar kind of tag permanently installed in our bodies so that they can detect our inoculation status. I think there's going to be a lot of legal concerns, a lot of moral concerns, certainly constitutional concerns, but we're sort of out of time for tonight, so we'll save that for another day.
Look forward, Jason. Also, we're going to bring a dissident on, a Chinese dissident, to show the American people with video what happened to him for advocating for spirituality and truth in communist China. Prison for 14 years, tortured in a labor camp.
Unbelievable. We'll have you back real soon, Larry. Thanks everybody for watching, and I hope that people will visit freedomwatchusa.org. Also, don't forget to become a sponsor of Crowdsource the Truth. I can't bring you these shows without your support and sponsorship. We don't want a giant corporate entity like News Corp controlling the news. It's up to you to sponsor this show, and by keeping these financial interests out of the sponsorship process, they have no undue influence on the stories that we bring you, on the guests that we bring you. So it's important that people become sponsors at subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a great night.
God bless you, Jason. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry.